never imagined a simple favor would quietly unravel years of careful solitude. The evening started like any other. Late spring air still clinging to my skin as I stepped inside after pruning the roses along the front walk. The clippers rested on the porch rail, petals scattered like soft confetti. Then my phone buzzed. Elena, 2 doors down, voice tight with apology. An emergency shift at the clinic. Could I watch Elias for a couple of hours? Of course I could. Elias had always been the quiet one on the street, polite, serious, carrying himself with a gravity unusual for 16. Something in his careful way of speaking reminded me of my own son at that age, before life pulled him across the country with a new family and a new rhythm that rarely included long calls home. I brewed a pot of chamomile tea, slipped into a soft beige sweater and navy slacks that felt like an embrace, and arranged the dining table with his textbooks. Sunlight poured through the lace curtains, painting the hardwood in warm amber pools. The house felt peaceful in that golden hour. The kind of stillness I had grown accustomed to and maybe even comforted by since my husband passed and the rooms grew too large for one person. The knock came gently. Elias stood on the threshold, backpack slung over one shoulder, cheeks flushed from the walk. "Thank you for this," he said immediately, voice low and earnest. I offered orange juice and the oatmeal cookies I'd baked the night before. He smiled small, shy, and sat, pulling out his notebook. The assignment was civics, community involvement, the quiet machinery of local government. I hadn't touched that material in decades. Yet the moment I leaned close to read his notes, the concepts returned like old friends. As we worked side by side, I caught him glancing at me, quick, stolen looks, then eyes dropping to the page again. At first I thought it was teenage awkwardness, but there was something else in how he sat straighter. Shoulders squared, as if trying to appear older. More equal to the conversation. It touched me. That small effort. His handwriting was precise, thoughtful. He listened with real attention, nodding, asking questions, jotting notes in the margins. We spoke about how even tiny acts could ripple outward, volunteering at the food pantry during the holidays, sitting with someone who simply needed to be heard. Sometimes listening is the biggest thing you can give, I told him. A spark lit behind his eyes, quiet but unmistakable. An hour in, his pencil stilled. Brows drawn together, he stared at the page without seeing it. "Everything okay?" I asked softly. He hesitated, then met my gaze, young, unguarded, startlingly direct. "You always talk to me like I'm not just a kid," he said. "Like what I say actually matters." My chest tightened. I hadn't meant to do anything special. It was simply how I spoke. Yet the words landed on him like rain on dry earth. "You're thoughtful, Elias," I said, resting my hand over his for a brief moment. "You notice things most people your age miss." "That's rare." He didn't pull away. His cheeks flushed faintly, but he held still. The room grew very quiet. The wall clock's soft ticking suddenly filled the space. I drew my hand back, reached for my tea, tried to lighten the air again. We finished the assignment, sorted his papers, and he gathered his things slowly. As if reluctant to let the evening end. At the door he paused, backpack strap twisted in his fingers. "Can I ask you something?" His voice was almost a whisper. "Of course." He looked at me, searching, vulnerable. "Do you ever feel like you're the only one who really listens to people?" The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth, closed it, searched for an answer that wouldn't sound too heavy. "Sometimes," I finally said. "But maybe that's why I try to be the one who does, even when it feels like no one else will." He nodded slowly. Then, without warning, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around my shoulders, a simple, gentle hug. But it carried the weight of everything unspoken. "Thanks," he murmured against my sweater, just like that. He was gone, walking down the sidewalk beneath a sky turning deep indigo. I closed the door, hand lingering on the knob. The warmth of that brief embrace still on my skin. Something had shifted. Subtle but undeniable. The next morning I sat at the kitchen table, stirring coffee I barely tasted, watching steam curl into the pale light. His question echoed in the quiet. The way he looked at me, really looked, had made me feel seen in a way I hadn't since my husband's laughter stopped filling these rooms, since my son's visits became holidays only. It wasn't attraction, nothing like that. It was simply human, honest, and in that honesty, A warmth I'd almost forgotten began to stir. Around noon, Elena texted again, another thank you, another request. Could Elias stop by after school? Another assignment. I agreed instantly. I told myself it was only homework. Just helping a neighbor's son. Yet I set out fresh cookies, straightened the table, adjusted the curtains so the light fell soft and golden again. When the knock came that afternoon, my heart lifted in a way I hadn't expected. Elias stepped inside, smiling that quiet, thoughtful smile, and something in the air felt. We opened Julius Caesar. I laughed softly when I saw the text, my favorite play from years as a substitute teacher. The irony, the betrayal, the hidden emotions beneath grand words. We read passages aloud. I asked him to consider Brutus, the cost of loyalty when doubt creeps in. He surprised me with his insights, pointing out nuances I'd missed at his age. You really care about this stuff, he said, looking at me with quiet admiration. You talk like it still matters. It does, I answered, voice catching on the truth. Even old stories remind us we're not so different. People have always felt lost, brave, betrayed, even when they don't know how to name it. He nodded slowly. You make it feel like it's okay to think like that. Like feeling things isn't weird. The words hung between us, fragile and real. We drifted from literature into something gentler, unplanned. He spoke of a teacher who dismissed him, made him feel small. How sometimes he wished he could be anyone else. You don't have to change who you are to matter, I said. The people who matter will see you. The quiet things. The details you think no one notices. He looked at me, eyes steady. Like you do? The question landed soft but deep. Every day. I admitted. Silence settled, comfortable, heavy with meaning. When he stood to leave, he paused at the door again. Can I come again tomorrow? Of course, I said. Any time. He gave a small smile, then added quietly, I don't think it's just the homework anymore. I met his gaze. I know. He walked away down the path, but the air behind him felt charged. Alive with something unspoken. The house didn't feel empty when the door closed. It felt expectant. Light fell soft and golden again. When the knock came that afternoon, my heart lifted in a way I hadn't expected. Elias stepped inside, smiling that quiet, thoughtful smile, and something in the air felt. We opened Julius Caesar. I laughed softly when I saw the text, my favorite play from years as a substitute teacher. The irony, the betrayal, the hidden emotions beneath grand words. We read passages aloud. I asked him to consider Brutus, the cost of loyalty when doubt creeps in. He surprised me with his insights, pointing out nuances I'd missed at his age. You really care about this stuff, he said, looking at me with quiet admiration. You talk like it still matters. It does, I answered, voice catching on the truth. Even old stories remind us we're not so different. People have always felt lost, brave, betrayed, even when they don't know how to name it. He nodded slowly. You make it feel like it's okay to think like that. Like feeling things isn't weird. The words hung between us, fragile and real. We drifted from literature into something gentler, unplanned. He spoke of a teacher who dismissed him, made him feel small. How sometimes he wished he could be anyone else. You don't have to change who you are to matter, I said. The people who matter will see you. The quiet things. The details you think no one notices. He looked at me, eyes steady. Like you do? The question landed soft but deep. Every day. I admitted. Silence settled, comfortable, heavy with meaning. When he stood to leave, he paused at the door again. Can I come again tomorrow? Of course, I said. Any time. He gave a small smile, then added quietly, I don't think it's just the homework anymore. I met his gaze. I know. He walked away down the path, but the air behind him felt charged. Alive with something unspoken. The house didn't feel empty when the door closed. It felt expectant. By the third evening, our meetings had woven themselves into a gentle ritual. The soft knock around 4:30, the way Elias entered with a quiet hello, as if stepping into a space that held its own kind of sanctity. I'd begun to anticipate it, the sound of his voice cutting through the afternoon hush, the subtle way his presence warmed the rooms. That day, clouds hung low, carrying a faint chill on the wind. I lit a candle on the side table, its amber scent drifting through the living room like a soft invitation. Elias arrived, backpack in hand, but he didn't unpack his books right away. He glanced at them, then at me, something hesitant in his posture. Can we just talk today? He asked, voice steady but soft. I didn't hesitate. Of course. Instead of tea, I brought hot chocolate-rich, steaming cups that filled the air with comfort. We sat at the table, the vapor rising like a delicate veil between us. The silence wasn't hollow anymore. It felt intentional, a space we created together to let thoughts breathe. He asked about my youth school days, dreams, fears. At first, I brushed it off with a laugh, but his seriousness drew me in. No one had asked those questions in years, not with such genuine curiosity. I wanted to be a writer, I confessed, smiling at the faded memory. Notebooks full of poems and stories, some decent, most awful. Why didn't you? The easy answer came first. Life, marriage, children, responsibilities. But it rang hollow this time. So I gave him the truth. I stopped believing my stories mattered. His eyes, wide and perceptive, held mine. They do. You tell them without trying. Just talking to you. It's like everything has meaning. The sincerity in his tone made me look away, warmth rising in my chest. No one, not even my late husband, had framed it that way. I'd buried that part of myself under Roll's wife, mother, neighbor until it felt forgotten. But Elias's questions stirred it awake, like a gentle hand on a sleeping heart. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. You make me feel like I'm not weird for caring, for thinking too much. You're not weird, I said softly. You're sensitive. That's rare. Precious. Hold on to it. His smile was small, vulnerable. Sometimes I wish you were my mom. The words surprised me, not shockingly, but deeply, touching a quiet ache I'd carried since my son left. I reached across, touched his hand not as a mother, but as someone who understood. I'm not Elias, but I care about you, deeply. That counts too. He nodded, and we sat in that shared quiet, the wind whispering against the windows, leaves rustling like distant secrets. Inside, we existed in a cocoon of understanding. Bound by something intangible yet profound. After a moment, he asked if he could share something he'd written. I agreed, and he unfolded a sheet from his bag, a short story, handwritten raw. About a boy lost in a forest, meeting a woman who guides him not by leading, but by listening. I read it slowly, words pulling at me. When I looked up, he watched closely. I wrote it after that first night, he said. Couldn't say it directly, so I made it a story. Tears pricked my eyes, but I held them. Instead, I leaned over and hugged him. He returned it fully, arms wrapping tight, as if anchoring to something solid. You'll be a wonderful writer, I whispered. Don't stop. He pulled back slowly, gaze soft respect, gratitude, recognition mingling there. Not infatuation, but something purer, deeper. He didn't linger long after. Dinner waited at home. But at the door he turned. You changed something in me. The words lingered as he left, echoing in the gathering dusk. Days passed without a knock, and the silence thickened, not lonely, but weighted with reflection. I wondered if that change had drawn a line. If our moments had reached their natural end, yet in the quiet I felt the pull of what might come next. Uncertain but alive. Part 3, word count 900. The days stretched without his knock, and the house returned to its familiar quiet. Not empty, but heavy with echoes, fragments of conversations, the scent of hot chocolate lingering faintly in the air. I kept his story folded in a drawer beside faded photographs and yellowed postcards, mementos of lives that had once intertwined with mine. It belonged there, among the pieces that had shaped me. Now joined by this unexpected thread, I wondered about Elias, often how his days unfolded at school. If our talks had planted seeds that might bloom in quiet ways. And I wondered about myself too. The warmth he'd stirred hadn't faded. It simmered gently, reminding me of paths I'd left unexplored. Then, one afternoon, the knock returned. I opened the door to find him standing there, not with his backpack, but holding a book, a slim collection of short stories, cover worn from handling. His smile was there, but tempered with a seriousness, as if he'd rehearsed his words. Can we sit outside? He asked. It's nice today. It was. Early spring air carried a soft warmth, the garden hinting at green beds under the old maple tree. I led him to the wooden bench. It creaked as we settled, a breeze rustling the branches above like a whispered secret. He handed me the book. I turned it over, eyebrows raised in quiet surprise. It's yours now, he said. You should write again. I think you stopped too soon. I brushed a thumb across the cover, a small smile forming. You remembered. I remember everything you say, he replied, his eyes meeting mine with steady intensity. The air stilled between us. Those words were beautiful, pointing a quiet heartbreak wrapped in tenderness. How many times had I longed for someone to truly hear me, to hold my stories like they mattered? Here was this young man on the cusp of his own becoming, reflecting back the fragments I'd buried under years of routine and loss. I've been thinking a lot, he continued, voice soft but sure, about who I am, what I want, and what it means to connect with someone like this. I stayed silent, offering him the space he'd given me so many times. I know there's a lot I don't understand yet, he said, but I do know how it felt here with you safe, seen without judgment. He turned toward me, emotion etching his features, not forced, but drawn from a well of truth deeper than his years. I want to be that for others. Like you've been for me. Something shifted in my chest, a blend of quiet ache and swelling pride. I reached for his hand, not in consolation, but in shared strength. You already are, Elias. You just don't see it yet. He leaned back, gazing up through the leaves, letting the moment settle without rush. The wind played softly, carrying the faint scent of blooming earth dot, then he spoke words I'll carry forever. You reminded me that I'm allowed to feel, to care. Even if it's complicated. Tears rose unbidden, and this time I let them trace warm paths down my cheeks. No shame, just raw truth. I guarded my vulnerabilities for so long, old wounds from a husband's absence, a son's distance making room for others while shrinking my own space. Elias had cracked that open gently with his honesty. He stood, looking down at me not as a boy lost, but as someone stepping forward into his light. I don't know what this will mean later, he said, but I'll always remember you not just as a neighbor, but as the first person who made me feel like I could matter. I rose, pulling him into one last hug. This time, it felt like a farewell, not to him, but to the chapter we'd shared. Some connections aren't built to endure endlessly. Their sparks meant to ignite something within Dad as he walked down the sidewalk. Fading into the afternoon light, no sadness washed over me. Instead, a quiet peace settled like a long-held breath finally released. That evening, I opened a fresh notebook, pages crisp and inviting, the kind I hadn't touched since dreams felt possible. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the room, but the quiet didn't press in. It expanded, full of potential. I didn't know what words would come first, a poem, a memory, a story born from these unexpected days. But I knew they would flow. For the first time in years, I felt not like someone filling time, but someone with a voice reclaimed, a heart reawakened, and in that gentle renewal, I understood. Sometimes the most profound changes arrive wrapped in the simplest of bonds, leaving us forever altered, forever grateful. If this story touched a quiet place in your heart, let it remind you that unexpected connections can heal what we thought was lost. Share your own in the comments below.